Cheers, man. Welcome to our podcast, our last 30, a podcast about life, death, and everything in between. Today, we do a solemn cheers, man. We do a cheers and recognition for those who have passed this past week, 7 days ago, man.
7 days ago.
Today is the 1 week since the floods in Central Texas. And we wanted to do a quick podcast about that. And, Cesar, we don't really get into the daily news, right? We don't really talk about politics. We don't talk about anything that's going to potentially negatively affect our jobs and our livelihood. But the truth of the matter is we felt compelled to speak about this topic here today. And we served ourselves a drink, man, just to kind of ease the nerves.
Make it a little easier to talk about such a hard topic and just such a tragedy from everything we've been seeing. I mean, over 160 people either dead or missing from these floods. Kids, counselors, parents, siblings, mothers, fathers. So yeah, we know we talk about death, life, and everything in between in the podcast. So today, unfortunately, is talking about death and that in between of it and that tragedy that came about last week and caught pretty much all of Texas out of nowhere. Like, we were not prepared for it. Central Texas was definitely not prepared for it. So yeah,
it's tough, man. Any natural disaster affects communities and everyone involved, families, elected officials, all the institutions involved that show up to help. And 7 days ago, we woke up to some really tragic news, man. I know that I get news feeds on my phone and I don't click on it because I tend to think it's not real, or something to try to entice you to click on the story. And it just said, the floods in Central Texas. So it took me a couple hours to click on that story, if you will, and learn more about it. And that's kind of where we're at today, man. We're not doing this for clicks. We're not creating a podcast so that we could get some kind of attention. We're actually doing this today from the rooftop of a hotel here in Houston as we prepare to present tomorrow to some students and colleagues here in Houston. But we wanted to do something to slow things down and recognize the people who passed. And that's kind of where we're at, man. We're at a position where we're using our platform to help slow things down, slow that conversation down, and acknowledge the lives that were lost, specifically and particularly the children. We talk about this often, about the impact of parents having to bury their children and what that does to their mental health, to their physical health, to their well-being. Cesar, can you imagine? We are 7 days in and some bodies have not been recovered.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. There's really not many words to describe how these parents, family members are feeling and what they're going through. I think it's just important to acknowledge that they're grieving, they're going through a tough stage in life. And yeah, honestly, I mean, that's what we're doing this episode as well. We're talking about it on the way here to Houston and just trying to just wrap our minds around the tragedy and everything that happened, and not necessarily understand, but just to try to picture and try to find sense of the tragedy and stuff like that. So for us as well, like we mentioned it in many of the episodes, for us this is kind of therapy as well, letting it out and not holding on to some of these tragedies that we see, some of the new stuff that we're going through that also hinders us mentally, that hinders ourselves, even though we're not technically affected personally by the tragedies.
Right.
Just, man, I mean, we were talking about the videos that we were watching earlier, the little girl singing in the bus, like that hits you regardless. So it's important, or we thought it was important for us to come on here and just talk a little bit about it, and share some of the two important stories that we found that really caught our attention and that made us really reflect on the whole thing, and kind of tying it back to that theme that we usually do our episodes on.
So that's kind of what we talked about, man, that we wanted to do this podcast and not for clicks,
No.
but to hold space for the lives that were lost, for the lives and bodies that have not been recovered, for the lives that have been interrupted forever. You know, if you're a parent listening in, will you ever fully recover?
Yeah.
And if I could just for a split second, you know, again, we don't really do politics on this podcast because it's dangerous. You're going to offend someone. You're going to be misinterpreted. There's not enough hours in the day to make a statement and fully explain yourself, I think, when you talk about politics. It's a difficult conversation. So we don't do that here, but we know that around us there are people looking to blame someone, and perhaps that's part of your conversation, and maybe that's even part of your job to find cause. But right now, 7 days in, still in the shock and disbelief phase of this whole thing. Still grieving and hurting, and I don't know that families are worried about who to blame. They just want, they just wish for another moment with them and the lives that were lost, and that's kind of what we're going to highlight today. We're going to talk about two different perspectives. You know, Cesar and I challenge each other to talk about two different things that impacted us. And we're impacted by the things that we hear, we see. We only know what they tell us, right, on the news. We don't have any inside information. We're also impacted by our own values and beliefs, the communities that we serve. So really, we have two stories that we wanted to feature, if you will. One of love and farewell, and the other of survival and international compassion. And if I may, as of today, before coming on and doing our podcast, 121 confirmed deaths and bodies have been recovered, with anywhere from 140 to 160 people still missing. And I think about those numbers. I think about the people behind those numbers, the lives lost, and I think about the families represented by each one of those individuals. I wanted to talk briefly, Cesar, about a story that I was listening to on the news, and if you're like me, we've been listening every chance we get on updates, and I think we're all hoping for a miracle. I think we're all hoping for a story to come out and say 10 lives were 10 people were recovered and they found them and somehow they survived, and like just looking for this miracle, man. And we know that the likelihood of that happening is not high, given where we're at in the timeline. But I wanted to share a story that impacted me, and that is a father's last words. As part of our podcast, we asked our guests, what would be your last words? What would you share with your family if you knew this was it? Our scenarios is, if you had 30 days to live, who would you tell? Who would you talk to? And what would you tell them? And the story I'm going to share about the family that I wanted to highlight is the Ramsey family. Jeff Ramsey and his spouse Tanya. And we know that there are many, many victims and many, many heroes. But this story stood out to me because there was a father's last words. As a father, I think often, if I knew that things were about to end, if I was so lucky to know that I had a few more minutes and seconds, I know who I'd call. I know what I would tell them. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what Mr. Ramsey did. Mr. Ramsey, a father of 2 adult children, and his wife, as they were anticipated their death, man. He had come to terms with the realization that he was not gonna make it. And he called his kids and left messages for them. And in fact, Cesar, one of the things he did before that is he called his brother-in-law to warn them, and he ended up saving their lives. Wow. They took that call, and because of that call, they were able to respond, react, and get out of there, and they survived. But that brother, that father, that husband, his last act of selflessness, right, of thinking of others, he saved some lives. Mm-hmm. And then he called his children, man. Called his children and he told them he loved them. The details we don't know, but the children said they never want to hear that message again. They heard probably in their father's voice fear. I can only imagine. And that's who I wanted to highlight today. I wanted to highlight all of the fathers that in their final moments would reach out and might make that last call. Yeah. To tell their kids they love them. Maybe a last bit of advice, maybe a whatever, so that they knew that their kids could hear their voice one last time. And if I may, Cesar, before I transition, hand it back over to you, that's what this podcast is for me, man. This podcast for me is an opportunity for my children to hear my voice one last time. Because one day I'm not going to be here. One day we're not going to be here. Yep. The guests that we've had on our show, on our program, on our podcast, one day they're not going to be here, but they left advice for their family, for you. And so we hope that as you continue to listen in, you feel compelled to reach out to people. We've asked you on several occasions, man, pause the video. Send a note to somebody. No. Send a text.
A text. Write that letter. Do whatever you got to do.
I actually wanted to take this moment, Cesar, envision myself in that same situation and share the following with my children. In 30 seconds, if I knew that my life was ending, I would just want you to know how much I love every one of you, how proud I am, what more could a father ask for? Each one of my children has this beautiful individuality and also collectivism as part of the family. And I would just wish if I had a few more seconds of time and I'm on the phone, I can leave that message. I just want them to hear my voice one last time so they know I love you. I've always loved you. I don't know what happens next, but I know I'm always going to love you. And I think a lot of fathers feel that way, man.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think so. I mean, we saw with the story that he shared that the last thought that he had was to call his kids to let them know that, hey, we tried. We weren't able to be rescued. We weren't able to be taken care of. But that last minute, that last words, will be stuck with their kids for the rest of their lives. And I mean, we've noticed and we know final goodbyes are heartbreaking. I mean, it's not something easy, especially in a situation like that. I think for me, the story that really hit home, it's one of two counselors at Camp Mystic. Camp Mystic, if I'm not mistaken, that's the name of it, in near the Guadalupe River. Two Mexican native counselors out here helping. This show just goes to show that in tragedy, in times of turmoil, hard times, borders don't really exist in that moment. We're all human beings at the end of the day. Just because these two counselors were Mexican doesn't mean they're not going to help their campers or the people that they're there. And honestly, I think that's what really, besides that part of that aspect of that story, the biggest thing that kind of hit with me was how calm and brave they were through all of this. They had to have that brave face. They had to be the ones giving that comfort to their campers. There were campers that were 8 years old, the earliest. So there were a lot of them that did end up dying. But because of them and their heroism and just their awareness in the situation where they were at, and knowing that they needed to be that kind of hope for these children, they were able to save dozens of other campers. And honestly, I think for me, that was a big part of the story and what I was reading. I mean, it's not easy, especially for these two young girls that having to see this everything, going through everything, but still being able to play games with the girls, being able to sing songs through everything that's going on, and being able to be with them, to keep that composure in the campsite where they were and wait hours till military people came and rescued them from the campsite before everything was destroyed. I was reading that there were about 27 campers that were as young as 8 years old that were swept in this raging flood waters near Camp Mystic. So I don't even want to imagine what the number would have been, what the number would have looked like if these two counselors wouldn't have stepped up in this time of need, and they would have put down that brave face for the rest of them and save all these other people and help them evacuate. So yeah, I think the two counselors, I had their names on here, Silvana Garza and Maria Paola Zarate, from Mexican descent. Like I said, they also received a very special message from President Sheinbaum from Mexico, thanking them for their heroism and giving the people that were affected from these floods her condolences. again, at the end of the day, these girls did honestly what I don't know if I would have been able to do in a moment like that. Um, but yeah, so that's just a little story that really stuck with me whenever we were reading. Um, they remained positive. They wanted the girls to be with their parents and wanted to save them and wanted to save that heartache for the family. And they stepped up to the plate and they were able to save dozens of people.
You know, it's stories like that of people who just risk their lives.
Yeah.
They those young ladies, the hundreds of people that came together to risk their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Some lost their life.
Yeah, trying
to save others. And some, in fact, saved lives. And what those floods took can never be replaced. But they leave behind stories that remind us how deep love is, what it means to be a community, what it means to be, dare I say, Texan.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say it all day long, man. To be Texan is to be badass, brother. We have gone through stuff. We deal with all kinds of unique challenges in this state. I would argue that others don't deal with, maybe even can't deal with. Maybe that's just a Texas arrogance in me. But I'm proud of fellow Texans that came through at that moment, right then and there. And I'm proud of people from other states and other countries that came in to provide aid, to help us when we were most in need. We may never know the names of the people of who saved who, but we will remember what they did. And maybe that's all that matters.
Yeah.
That we know that fellow Americans came through for fellow Americans. Fellow Texans stepped up for fellow Texans. At that moment, when they most needed them, and afterwards, with donations, with time, with search efforts. I think about companies like HEB that mobilized to come help. I think about the Cajun Army that mobilized to come and help. And so many others. I don't know them all. You know, we thought about going down to Kerrville, but it would be, we didn't think it would be right. Right now, if you're down there, you should be helping. Because we can't offer that help right now. It wouldn't be appropriate to be there. So for us, we wanted to use this platform to just recognize the lives lost, the families that are struggling. And if there's anything you can do to help, I don't know, man. I'm still in shock. I'm in disbelief that many lives were lost. People that you may know, people you may be related to, and this video will live forever. So maybe one day family members will of the lives that were lost will listen in. You have any words for them, man? If they're listening in, maybe not today because they're not in a place where they can be listening emotionally. But in years down the road, they may listen in, Brood. Do you have any advice for them or any kind of?
I think there's no words or advice for these individuals and what they're going through. Honestly, at the time, yeah. Well, I mean, it's a situation none of us want to be in. It's a situation that unfortunately they were put in that situation. Now they have to deal with it for the rest of their lives and figure out how to cope with the tragedy, how to be better, how to continue to leave a legacy that's going to continue to uplift their loved ones and to continue to remember them. I think for me, that's the biggest words of advice that I could give. Just continue to honor them, continue to do what they would have wanted each and every person to do, and keep them in your prayers, keep them in your thoughts, keep them in whatever it is that they're doing, because I feel like they will always be with these individuals, and um, yeah, just learning to cope with it.
I think that we we created this podcast, Caesar, to help people talk about um, death. Specifically, we wanted to help talk about death, and in the discussions about death, we naturally started talking about what precedes death, and that is the beauty of life. And I don't know why young lives and families and and young fathers and young mothers and grandparents, I don't know why those lives were taken. I don't know the complexity of it all. But I know that the whole thought behind our podcast is for us to talk about death, life, and all those things in between. And I hope that if you've been listening, and if you're one of our subscribers, listeners, participants, and supporters, I hope that you remember that we're only here for a little bit, man. May tragedy never affect you, but we know statistically someone that we know and love will be affected. I wish in a perfect world we didn't have to die, but that's not how it works, man. We're all going to transition from here. I hope that if today's your last day, that you lived it to your fullest. I hope that if it's your last words that you offer someone, that it uplifts them. If you're listening today, it's because we're all alive. So may you continue to live, continue to leave a legacy. And I'd ask that you say, Caesar said, say a prayer for these families. And I would ask you to say, oh man, just whisper something positive into the air. Whisper something positive into the air around you. And if the 7 billion people on this planet can whisper something positive, maybe we can start making a change. Maybe it doesn't even take the 7. Maybe it's just your community. Maybe it's just your family. Maybe it just starts with you. I'm sorry that we're here today talking about this tragedy, but I know this. We have, for the last 7 days, we have been overwhelmed and inundated by news. We hope that you take time to grieve and heal.
Oh.
And please feel free to reach out to us ever. If you're ever in a situation, if we're still living, we're still giving, we're still helping, man.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Take some time this week. Take care of yourself. And if you have enough energy, enough to pour, take care of somebody else. Thank you so much.
See you guys. Thank you.
See you, man.